Wow. You're, like, really lost. How do you even get lost in the infinite vacuum of space? This must be really disconcerting for you. No matter. To open this door, you will require this key, called imagination. Say hi, imagination. Keys don't talk. Beyond this door is...
Ah, suit!
What?
A suit! A suit! You're wearing it.
Imagination, how are you talking right now? You're an inanimate object.
What's with the suit, my guy? You're cheesy! You always wear a purple t-shirt with grilled cheese on it! Always! But now you're wearing a suit, and it's pissing me off!
That t-shirt isn't the only thing I wear.
Yes, it is.
Come on, what possible reason would somebody have to only wear one article of clothing every single day?
Brand recognition.
Okay, you know what, forget
Wait,
this. Actually, we're just gonna...
No.
Beyond this door is a dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of shine. You're about to enter into a world of werewolf incest and childhood gangbangs of... Whoa, what is happening here? Okay, we're floating. Oh, that's fine. This is zero gravity, it's outer space. This is expected. Okay, and we're spinning now. Alright, this is not ideal. I'm gonna try something. Let's see if it works. Okay, now I'm just going faster in the same direction. This is not... Okay, this is not my contract. Oh, wait. We're stopping. Why are we...
Watch out. It's the crumple zone.
Open on a man, nay a boy, nay a creature. His name is Cheezi, and what he doesn't realize is that his world is about to be turned upside down, just like I was a mere 5 seconds ago. Cheezi is preparing for yet another mundane video on yet another mundane day after yet another mundane masturbation session. He has chosen to talk about Stephen King books and their film counterparts, but what he doesn't realize is that this is going to send him spiraling into a world of crappy film adaptations and narrative inconsistencies, the likes of which he has never seen before. What you are about to witness will leave you appalled, disgusted, and maybe even a little aroused. Learn from his mistakes, because Cheezi is about to watch the movies before he reads the books, leading him on a road less traveled, right into the chaotic intersection of the crumple zone. Well, shit. Hi, I'm Cheezi, and I don't have an intro. But I do seem to have something wrong with my office door. See, I don't know exactly what's causing it, but interdimensional beings keep walking through it and ranting at me in the third person. It's weird. But not as weird as these Stephen King books, am I right? Oh, Stephen. Stephen. Who hurt you? Stephen King is an American horror author whose works date back to 1974, when he released Carrie to a post-Nixon world.
I have never been a quitter. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad. I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
His next 3 releases would cement him as a staple of coffee tables and bookshelves across the globe. Salem's Lot would be nominated for a World Fantasy Award in 1976, and remains one of the best vampire narratives I've ever consumed alongside Midnight Mass and Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Renfield, you idiot.
Rage is to this day one of the most controversial books ever written. Living on in Infamy is the story that allegedly inspired multiple acts of violence across the Midwest, and it's a book that King wrote under a pseudonym specifically to see if his books were good enough to sell without his name attached to them.
And I'd done 4 other books that were not very much like what I usually do. That is to say, there were 4 novels that weren't horror novels. And so Bachman was a place to get rid of those books. And, you know, the other thing was I was curious.
The absolute legend. And of course, who could forget the humble tale about a boy and his mother facing the inhumanities of hotel management, known simply as the Shop. Yeah, you know, not a lot of people probably know this one. Maybe I should just leave it out of the script. You gotta understand why people love this guy's books. Stephen King's way of telling a story is so understated, starting by introducing the characters and then compounding on their traits as the situation unfolds, the tension of the narrative slowly ramping up to a boiling point until suddenly ghosts are popping out of the walls, or a girl covered in blood is walking out of a school, or some poor cripple is eating his own severed thumb off of his homemade birthday cake, and you're left wondering how exactly you got here. But nothing is quite as compelling about King's writing as the way he differentiates between good and evil. Stephen King grew up in and around organized religion in a small town on the East Coast called Portland, Maine.
Portland isn't a small town, dumbass.
Oh, really?
For real? We're taking time out of this video to do this stupid bit?
Yes, now shut up as we do true facts about... Portland, Maine is a marine city which rests on the east coast bordering the Atlantic Ocean. Originally settled in 1632, it wasn't incorporated into the greater United States until 1786, a full decade after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, due to its insignificant size and the fact that George Washington fully forgot it existed while writing the document.
Not true.
The Native Americans who discovered the territory referred to it as Mashigone, which roughly translates to Great Neck, most likely due to the fact that they literally could not come up with anything good to say about it.
Conjecture.
The main draws of Portland as a city are, of course, its fishing-based economy, but the town has a number of significant monuments, including the Portland Museum of Fine Art, Monument Square, about 18 different lighthouses, and a restaurant just called Duck Fat. The city itself clocks in at a measly 69, square miles in size with an elevation of 62 feet. For comparison's sake, the shortest skyscraper in New York is the McGraw-Hill building constructed in 1931, which clocks in at a whopping 485 feet, nearly 8 times the height of Portland's highest point. In summary, it's a podunk fishing village that the Founding Fathers forgot about even though it was literally a 6-hour drive away, whose main export is seafood dining and keeping Robert Eggers' location scout in work. Satisfied?
It has like 68,000 people in it.
Yeah, so does your mother. Stephen King had a fairly standard childhood, excluding what we Stephen King fans collectively refer to as the Thomas the Pain Engine incident. He grew up Methodist, but lost his interest in organized religion before graduating high school. What's interesting about this is that to this day, Stephen King still claims to believe in the concept of God.
The existence of God. At this stage in your life, do you believe in God?
I do. I made a decision to believe in God because it's better to believe than not to believe.
And many of his works tackle organized religion in a negative light, whereas the concept of spirituality and the supernatural aren't always so cut and dry in their negativity. But what's more interesting than how Stephen portrays God-fearing individuals is how he portrays the idea of good and evil as concepts. There's an implication that the evil we're witnessing in each of Stephen King's stories isn't just some mad dog or some troubled young girl or a haunted hotel. There is a force in the universe of these books, a force for evil that corrupts everything it touches, reaching out to those that are most susceptible and making them part of its tangled web. This web of evil cannot be killed, and even if one foe is extinguished, eventually they'll reappear somewhere down the line, sometimes decades after one story ends and another begins.
Sometimes I feel like my life is a tangled web of negativity and darkness. An inescapable prison of torment when I'm forced to witness your white trash ass and dumb clown hair day after day with no hope for escape.
That's nice, Stoogie.
Part of the reason I'm a drug addict.
Well, you know, admitting you have a problem is the first step towards recovery.
How about I put you in recovery?
But what Stephen King portrays even better than the unending tide of evil that his iconic horror villains represent is the fact that for every child-eating clown or possessed Volkswagen Beetle,
Wrong, living car story, shit for brains.
there's a plucky group of kids or a pure human soul ready to stand up against the evil. And in Stephen King's books, the giant murderous spider clown doesn't win in the end. The Losers Club does.
By having sex with each other. I'm just gonna, yeah.
In this way, Stephen King is almost the anti-Lovecraft. His books are approachable. Most of his books are approachable. And sci-fi and horror concepts they uses are dark, gritty, and often unexplainable, but always end with them being vanquished by plucky, resourceful, hopeful humanity. And that's the word I would use to describe Stephen King's narratives. Hopeful. It's that spirit of hopefulness and that faith and heart at the center of every narrative that serves to be a light shining in the darkness, leading you through every horrifying twist and turn and encouraging you to turn the next page just to see how bad things can get, knowing full well that somehow, someday, the scales will balance, and for all the evil that the book's antagonist has done, justice and retribution are right around the corner.
So what about the movies?
You! Me? This video is for you! Wait, you're talking to me right now? Yes, that's right, you! Why? All you filmmakers out there who are looking to adapt a Stephen King story into film. But I don't want to adapt a Ow! Why again? Hey! I'm not talking to you. You're the cameraman. I'm talking to the audience. Shut up. Be quiet. Rude. Stephen King has made quite a number of stories during his time on this trash-coated frisbee we call planet Earth, and most of them are incredible. Many of them are even good. And when somebody makes something of quality, understandably, the first impulse of most creative people is to take that exact thing and make it again. This always works. I don't want to be overly negative here, but wait a minute, I don't have a cameraman. Wait, are you talking to me now? Yes. Like, for real this time. Yes. Okay, cool, because last time you did this, you were talking to the camera, and I wasn't sure. Who are you? How did you even get here? Oh, I went through the door. Oh, for the love of...
Have you considered closing the door?
Yeah, but the last guy had a key.
Your door doesn't have a keyhole.
I know, right? Tell me about it.
A laugh track for your own joke. Really?
What, you didn't like it?
No.
So you're saying we have creative differences?
In most cases. Oh God, no. I made you happy. What did it? Well, this can't be good. What does mine say?
Nothing.
Oh shit. Did I just tee you up for a trip?
The Shining is both a novel written by Stephen King and a film released by Stanley Kubrick. The novel is the third ever written work of King's, and the film is Kubrick's third to last ever released. By the turn of the century, Kubrick will have spent the better part of 2 decades stagnating after a hot streak of film releases, with glowing critical reception dating back to 1952.
The winner is Stanley Kubrick. Kubrick unfortunately cannot be with us tonight. He is scouting locations for 2002, Space Odyssey Revisited.
These last 2 decades will herald the end of Stanley Kubrick's filmmaking career, with the release of Full Metal Jacket in 1987, the release of Eyes Wide Shut in 1999, and the release of The Shining in 1980. Now, I'm not going to say this is karma. Everyone knows that The Shining film has become an iconic staple of the horror genre, but when it was first released, it was a critical failure. Stanley Kubrick was even awarded a Razzie for Worst Director as a result of working on the project. But he didn't just direct it, oh no, he produced and co-wrote it, alongside a French writer by the name of Diane Johnson, who has since gone on to write such great works as The Divorce, released in 2003, and... that's it. Now, I'm not going to say this is karma. The reason I'm bringing up The Shining in this video is rather simple. If you want an example of how not to adapt a Stephen King story, you need to look no further. There's no denying it's an iconic film, and well made for sure, but the way it handles its source material is borderline disrespectful. Let's dive further into why that is by first addressing what the original book is all about. The novel follows the story of the Torrance family, who... Who's there? Here's Cheezi! Ah! Actually, you know, this axe is actually kind of dull. I'm gonna go get a different one. Now, where was I?
You were talking about the Shining book.
Right, The Shining. Well, the book follows the Torrance family as they head up to the Overlook Hotel to maintain it for the winter. As the cold creeps in, ghoulish guests begin to haunt the family, driving Jack Torrance, the father, slowly insane, exaggerating his worst traits before he eventually goes on a rampage throughout the hotel. Miss Torrance and Danny are rescued by the hotel's summertime caretaker, Dick Halloran, and escape on a snowmobile while Jack stays behind to stop the evil within the hotel once and for all, blowing up the building and leaving it a smoldering wreck on the mountainside. To this day, it is one of Stephen King's best and most iconic works. And then Stanley Kubrick got his grubby mitzel. Stanley Kubrick worked alongside Diane Johnson to adapt Stephen King's novel for the big screen due to Kubrick's desire to write a psychological horror story. Miss Johnson has since gone on record stating that, quote, when it came to the horror film, he did not want to make a movie that depended unduly on ghosts and gimmicks for horrific effect. Though he did not rule out the supernatural, he wanted to create a film in which the horror generated from human psychology. He wanted to know what the King novel was about in the deepest psychological sense. Perhaps he also thought I would be freer, less respectful, and more flexible than the author himself in tampering with the text. Just do it already. Works for me. Do you see the problem here? This approach to adapting a story written by Stephen King shows a level of haughty ineptitude, the likes of which I have never before perceived. This would be like if somebody wanted to adapt Harry Potter and went, look, I want to tell the story of Harry Potter as a lens through which to analyze education in Great Britain. But all this wizardly hocus-pocus stuff is too high fantasy for my taste. So let's draw focus away from that for our story and get to the real meat of how J.K. Rowling was actually critiquing the public education system. I mean, just look at this woman. Look at her tweets. Does she look like she knows anything about education?
Alright, that was a cheap shot.
Maybe so, but my point still stands. Stephen King stories are about good versus evil, about hope in humanity, about our ability to combat the darkness and live to fight another day.
Are you aware that your forehead is bleeding?
Are you aware that your face is stupiding?
That doesn't even make sense.
Sense no need make when into insult monkey.
Are you having a stroke?
Brain bleeding. So, in Stanley Kubrick's infinite wisdom, he decided to hire this random person who admits to having never written a screenplay before to adapt this story instead of accepting a screenplay which Stephen had already written for this project. Kubrick even went as far as to not allow King to collaborate with him on any element of the film whatsoever.
I had a discussion with him beforehand. He said, "Stephen, Stanley Kubrick here. Don't you agree that all stories of ghosts are fundamentally optimistic?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, if there are ghosts, it means we survive death, and that's fundamentally an optimistic view, isn't it?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Kubrick, what about hell?" And there was a long pause on the telephone line, and then he said in a very stiff and very different voice, "I don't believe in hell."
Most of the touches Diane Johnson added to the film were scrapped anyway. Quoting her once again, "I was interested in the Wendy character and gave her some more sympathetic lines. Although I did not watch the filming, Shelley Duvall later told me that she and Kubrick were a little at odds and he had cut a lot of her lines. The result was not a round Wendy as I had hoped to characterize her, and so did King, but a moist character, reduced to tears and whimpers."
I always thought that the real difference between my take on it and Stanley Kubrick's take on it was this. In my novel, the hotel burns. In Kubrick's movie, the hotel freezes.
The narrative we watch play out on screen in Stanley Kubrick's rendition, at its core, is not a Stephen King story. It's built from a foundation made of bricks torn from a Stephen King narrative, like an old hotel being renovated from the ground up. And so the ghosts of what might have been are present. There are whispers of the source material, sometimes whole scenes are copied directly from the novel, but the heart of what makes The Shining great, the three-dimensional Wendy Torrance, a loving mother trying to keep her family alive and help Jack not lose his sanity, or Jack, the adoring husband and father with personal demons that he almost succumbs to but eventually defeats for the sake of his family. These things are not there. They were never there. Kubrick made sure of it.
Hey, what about...
Wow, Stoogie. Very rude of you. You don't just walk into a room and start screaming at people.
You're a dick.
Thank you for stopping the fall of my books with your supple plush fur-covered body, however. That was really considerate of you.
God. Why do I hang out with you?
Because you're contractually obligated.
Huh?
What?
Look, as much fun as it is to listen to you curds and wail about stuff you hate.
Curds and what? Oh, nice.
Yeah. As much fun as that is, there's gotta be an example of a good Stephen King adaptation you could use to compare.
Funny you should say that.
After so long, I think we deserve the sun.
Gerald's Game was a Stephen King book released in 1992 about a woman trapped in her vacation home after a sex game with her distant husband goes horribly wrong, resulting in her handcuffed to the bed and her husband dead on the floor.
Sound more real now, huh?
Hot. The book follows a traditional chamber story structure, where the entire narrative takes place in one location, barring a couple of flashbacks to the main character's childhood. We read the protagonist's internal monologue as she slips in and out of lucidity, re-evaluating her life and her connection to both her husband and her father. Slowly, meticulously, she works to keep herself alive until she can figure out a way to escape the cuffs and free herself. It's an absolutely fantastic story about empowerment in the face of pre-existing trauma, and it was adapted into a Netflix original film back in 2017. Whoa, wait, what are you doing with that? Wait, Nimona was great. Hey. Perfect animation, excellent storytelling. Nimona, right? Yeah, you know I'm right. Listen, I know that the phrase Netflix original film instills about as much confidence as a mini-mall health inspection, but this film is a perfect adaptation, and I do not say that lightly. The film was adapted from the original source material and directed by Mike Flanagan. If that name isn't familiar to you, then you've obviously not been keeping up with horror trends over the past decade. Mike Flanagan is the creative genius responsible for some of my favorite works of horror fiction: Haunting of Hill House, Hush, Midnight Mass, and maybe just forget that last one. Oh God, no. It's happening again. No, you can't. No! No!
You saw yourself in the mirror again, didn't you?
I mean, look at that thing. It's hideous. Oh, it makes me want to eat glass. Oh, come on, man. Not cool. The movie stars Carla Gugino as the main character Jessie, who gives one of the best performances of her career.
What's happening?
Well, I'm pretty sure you just lost your mind.
We watch her portray a desperate woman's slow descent into insanity, and in one of the bigger divergences from the original source material, her own hallucinatory double as well. The movie portrays a lot of Jessie's internal monologue through the mouthpiece of disembodied mental figments, masquerading as both her deceased husband and a much more capable and confident version of herself.
I told you. It's that easy.
Oh, baby, you're really listening now.
Their bickering and color commentary portray Jessie's fractured psyche as she desperately cloys for a way out of her predicament, surrounded by symbols of her entrapment in both her life and this house. The handcuffs, the dog, her husband's body, and of course... But we'll get to that.
You know you're crazy when you start to see a bunch of versions of yourself all over the place.
Right?
Man, another classic character gets whitewashed.
Who?
Idris Elba.
What? I call this film a perfect adaptation for one simple reason. Beat for gut-wrenching beat, the movie follows along with the book. The pacing of how the story unfolds in Stephen King's work is exactly the same in the film, and the only things removed are those that don't serve the narrative directly, like auxiliary characters unrelated to the central conflict. I'm about to spoil the ending of this entire film, so if you're not convinced by how adamantly I've been pitching it up until this point, get out of here and don't come back until you finish watching Gerald's Game on Netflix. Anyone? I didn't mean you.
I haven't seen it yet.
You're still supposed to be... You're not getting out of the video that easy. We'll be back. Probably. During the course of Jessie's incarceration, she is haunted by a mysterious specter that arrives at night, carrying a box of bones and trinkets which she believes to be the spirit of death itself, the Moonlight Man. In the film, this character is portrayed by Carol Strucken to grim effect. During the film's conclusion, after Jessie faces her childhood trauma and escapes the cabin, leaving her wedding ring as a token with the Moonlight Man, we learn that this man was no specter at all. He was a very real serial killer that had been stalking the woods near this cabin, killing and eating people and robbing graves for treasure. We learn this during what is considered the book's most controversial sticking point, its ending. You see, the ending plays out in an epilogue where we learn the truth of the Moonlight Man, how Jessie learns of his capture and conviction, and ends with her facing him in a courtroom where she spits in his face and walks away. Many people panned this ending when the book was released as meandering, clunky, and not in line with Stephen King's past works. Explaining away a supernatural occurrence in a Stephen King film was, at the time, jarring for most audiences and wasn't in line with the rest of his works. Flanagan very well could have changed this ending, just like Kubrick did with The Shining. And he did.
You're so much smaller than I remember.
When discussing Gerald's game, Mike Flanagan had this to say about the controversial ending. Quote, "It was something when I read the book that I loved. I know it was polarizing with fans of the book, but there was never a time when it felt right to do the film without that ending. For better or worse." What else is there to say? I mean, I hope I've made the point that Flanagan just understood King in a way Kubrick didn't. And that's important if you're going to be adapting somebody's works. You can't just tear out the pieces you like some surgeon with a scalpel, and just leave behind all the detritus of what you didn't enjoy or what didn't make sense to you. If you're going to adapt something, anything, but especially something as deeply personal and often topical and rich as a King story, you have to give it the respect it deserves, and Flanagan respected King's works. I've read this book over and over and over again, and honestly, in comparison to the film, they're basically exactly the same. And not because they follow the book word for word, and not because every event happens in the same place, and not even because Flanagan didn't take creative liberties. He did. But the heart of the story, of all of King's stories, was never the monsters. It was never the space clown or the demon dog or the interdimensional gunslingers. It was us, the reader. It was about us. It was about the goodness inside of everyone, the faintest flicker that can light the darkness, and how that deserves to be protected. I think I probably made my point, but I really want to hammer it home. So there's one more adaptation I want to talk about today. We've seen what an adaptation that misses the mark looks like. And we've seen one that nails it right on the head. But there's one more adaptation. It was the reason I wanted to make this video in the first place. It was a movie that until halfway through I didn't even know was a King story, because there was just something off from the beginning. So I want you to venture with me one more time and follow me into the mist. My comparison between Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft was not simply superfluous simile for the sake of setting up this Saints' Eve special. Many of Stephen King's works directly reference ideas present in Lovecraft's mythos. The idea of an infinite and uncaring universe is one that the main characters often battle against in stories like the Dark Tower series, and in the book It, the Losers Club end up meeting with a giant intergalactic turtle, which the universe rests on, and who is locked in an eternal battle with the spider clown monster the children are facing. I mean, not only does this prove that Stephen King was definitely on cocaine when he was writing this book,
What's wrong with that?
but it also serves to correlate this book, and by extension Stephen King's entire literary universe, with one of the cornerstones of Lovecraftian mythology. The great old ones, beings that dwell outside of the known boundaries of the universe, ones that are both all-powerful and incomprehensible. And nowhere... I'm sorry. Do you hear that?
Hear what?
Sorry. Nowhere is this correlation more apparent than in what can only be described as King's most on-the-nose eldritch horror story, The Mist. The story follows a group of people who are trapped in a supermarket after a freak meteorological event covers the town in a thick, supernatural mist. As the trapped civilians get more and more antsy, strange creatures are revealed to be dwelling within the storm, ready to claim any unfortunate souls who dare to brave the fog. Societal norms and civility swiftly break down among their ranks, and the group devolves as a single parent widowed by the storm endeavors to ensure the survival of himself and his son. The first creature that the group encounters is described as a tentacle tapered from a thickness of a foot, the size of a grass snake, at the point where it had wrapped itself around Norm's lower leg, to a thickness of maybe 4 or 5 feet where it disappeared into the mist. It was slate gray on top, shading to a fleshy pink underneath, and there were rows of suckers on the underside. They were moving and writhing like hundreds of small, puckered mouths. I mean, it doesn't get much more Lovecraftian than eldritch tentacles coming out of seemingly nowhere to abduct hapless mortals.
Little busy, but no.
At first glance, this story and the movie release in 2007 appear to follow the Gerald's Game route. Most of the narrative beats follow point to point, and a lot of the dialogue is pulled directly from the novel.
Ma'am, please, wait until...
Almost all of the tertiary characters are kept completely consistent, from Oliver, the surprisingly capable store clerk who ends up becoming our protagonist's right-hand man, to Miss Beverly, the taxidermy zealot who ends up turning the remaining market dwellers into a crazed Christian murder cult before she's inevitably shot and killed. The fact that the movie follows the book almost exactly makes the way it diverges from the source material that much more confusing. The movie and book differ in a number of minor ways, but there are 2 major ones that stand out, one at the beginning of the movie and the ending. Let's start at the beginning. The book goes into great detail about the storm that precedes the Mist's arrival, just like the movie does. Both start on the night before the Mist arrives. But the movie leaves out a critical detail, a certain dream that our protagonist has on the night of the big storm. Direct quote from the book. "I had a dream that I saw God walking across Harrison on the far side of the lake. A God so gigantic that above the waist he was lost in a clear blue sky. In the dream I could hear the rending crack and splinter of breaking trees as God stamped the woods into the shape of his footsteps. He was circling the lake, coming toward the Brighton side, towards us, and all the houses and cottages and summer places were bursting into purple-white flame like lightning, and soon the smoke covered everything. The smoke covered everything like a mist." The Mist, without the context of this crucially important series of events, would lead many to believe that King and Lovecraft are of 2 minds on this subject, but that is just the opposite of true. For sure, Stephen King has been no stranger to demonstrating the dangers of organized religion in his works. From the way that the townsfolk treat the little girl in Carrie, to the way that the shopkeep is portrayed in Needful Things. But as much as King warns against the dangers of organized religion in his stories, he himself is a very spiritual person in real life. In a Lovecraft story, the protagonist can scream to the heavens for aid and never hear a word back. But King is constantly throwing his characters spiritual lifelines in the form of shine, spirits from the past that guide them, and in the case of The Mist, a crucial clairvoyant dream that corroborates the coming cataclysm implied to be from God himself. To put it in the man's own words, my view is that organized religion is a very dangerous tool that is misused by a lot of people. I choose to believe in God because I believe that makes things better. I believe it is a source of strength. And it's that very strength that allows Carrie to overcome her oppressors and her peers. It's that very strength that allows the Torrance family to escape the Overlook Hotel unscathed. It's that very strength that gives Jessie the ability to free herself from her shackles and live as a free woman once more. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was a lonely, miserable bastard who hated everybody and was afraid of everything. His stories reflected the ways in which he viewed the world. They were hopeless, nihilistic, deeply disturbed, and wallowed in places where light didn't shine. Stephen King is not H.P. Lovecraft, and even if some of his stories emulate ideas or concepts that Lovecraft explored in his works, he can't help but demonstrate the eldritch hope of the human condition. Which brings us to the ending of this particular story. Only 5 of the still sane supermarket squatters manage to escape. After driving until their gas runs out, no end to the mist in sight, our protagonist looks down at the gun in his hand and the 4 bullets in the chamber. With the rest of the survivors' consent, he makes the ultimate decision. And then, just as our hero is at his lowest, his breaking point, this happens. I couldn't believe what I was watching. This was a Lovecraftian ending through and through. All of the sacrifices, the military men, the bag boy, Oliver, it had all meant nothing. It was all so hopeless. I had to read the story for myself to see if it lined up, to see if maybe this director had made some sort of creative differences or choices like Kubrick did, or if maybe I just didn't understand King the way I thought I did. And when I read the last little chunk of this short story, I knew I had to make this video. As I write this, it is 1:45 in the morning, July the 23rd. The storm that seemed to signal the beginning of it all was only 4 days ago. Billy is sleeping in the lobby on a mattress that I dragged out for him. Amanda and Mrs. Repler are close by. I am riding by the light of a big Delco flashlight, and outside the pink bugs are ticking and thumping off the glass. Every now and then there's a louder thud as one of the birds takes one off. The Scout has enough gas to take us maybe another 90 miles. The alternative is to try to gas up here. There is an Exxon out on the service island, and although the power's off, I believe I could siphon some up from the tank. But that means being outside. If we can get gas here or further along, we'll keep going. I have a destination in mind now. You see, it's that last thing I wanted to tell you about. I couldn't be sure. That is the thing. The damned thing. It might have been my imagination. Nothing but wish fulfillment. And even if not, is it such a long chance? How many miles? How many bridges? How many things that would love to tear up my son and eat him, even as he screamed in terror and agony? The chances are so good that it was nothing but a daydream that I haven't told the others. At least not yet. In the manager's apartment, I found a large battery-operated multi-band radio. From the back of it, a flat antenna wire led out through the window. I turned it on, switched over to bat, fiddled with the tuning dial, with the squelch knob, and still got nothing but static or dead silence. And then, at the far end of the AM band, just as I was reaching for the knob to turn it off, I thought I heard, or dreamed I heard, one single word. There was no more. I listened for an hour, but there was no more. If there was that one word, it came through some minute shift in the damping mist, an infinitesimal break that immediately closed again. One word. I've got to get some sleep. If I can sleep and not be haunted until daybreak by the faces of Ollie Weeks and Mrs. Carmody and Norm the Bag Boy, and by Steph's face, half-shadowed by the wide brim of her sun hat. There is a restaurant here, a typical Hojo restaurant with a dining room and a long horseshoe-shaped lunch counter. I am going to leave these pages on the counter, and perhaps someday someone will find them and read them. One word. If I only really heard it. If only. I'm going to bed now. But first I'm going to kiss my son and whisper 2 words in his ear. Against the dreams that may come, you know. 2 words that sound a bit alike. One of them is Hartford. The other is hope. Stoogie, are you doing that? Stoogie. Stoogie, answer the phone. Stoogie, what are you... What kind of ARG bullshit is this? Hello? Hello?
Stoogie.
Oh God. Tell you what, nigga. I ain't ever doing cocaine again. Cheezi? Bitch, where you at? Motherfucker.
Hello? Hello? Hello, Cheezi.